with host Kevin Evans. To continue the conversation, head over to codetocloud.io.
Hey, and welcome to Code to Cloud. I'm your host, Kevin Evans. And today I've got an old friend coming on, Michael Levan. Michael, how's it going, man?
Can't complain. Thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
I know folks can't see it, but he's always got the ultimate setup, right? He's got the best computers, right? Best PCs. He's got the Octocat in the background, right? He's got the whole platform engineering setup going on there, right? So
that's it, man. Yeah, the e-glass too. I've been doing a lot more with the e-glass. That's really cool, where you can I kind of just draw on it, right? And I can do the recording stuff, and it's just different types of content, trying to reach everybody in the way that they want to learn. It's with the podcast, it's just so important to be able to switch the pieces of content up that you're going to use in the public.
I completely agree. I really like it. I need to build one myself. I was going to get a one of those big Dell screens that were you can draw on it, architecture drawings, but the 10 grand price tag, right, put me off slightly. It's like a massive Surface Hub, right?
I know. So. Yeah, that was, I think, 2,300, if I'm not mistaken. And then there's also the Wacom tablets, I think that's how you pronounce it, which are really cool. You can just kind of, have a black screen in the background that you're recording and then just kind of draw on it, which is really nice. So luckily there are a couple of different options.
Sounds awesome. So do you just want to quickly introduce yourself and then I'll get onto the topic? Because I know you. I've known you for years, right? Before I made it across the pond, but maybe...
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what do I do? What a tough question. Well, I do everything in the cloud native consulting and training space. I also create a lot of content. I've published a couple of different books, and I do the whole YouTube thing and the podcasting and all that stuff. But really what I've been focusing on over the past couple of years has been Kubernetes and overall containerization and application modernization. And I just started, diving deeper into hybrid cloud and more into the app modernization piece and just overall performance, scalability, and how environments actually need to run cloud native in today's world.
So let's start off with, because we're going to talk about hybrid cloud or adaptive cloud, depending which cloud provider you work for. Let's talk about app modernization.
Yeah.
Right. Let's get started with that. So, let's wind the clock back 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. App modernization was just literally getting a application workload off a virtual machine into some sort of serverless function, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does that modernization look like these days, right? We still containerizing workloads? What's going on there?
Yeah, so we were talking the other day, actually, texting back and forth about this, and you brought up a really good point, which is what is it conceptually? Well, think about it like this. You got a .NET app. You got to turn it into .NET Core so you can run it elsewhere. Then you want to run it on Linux. Then maybe you want to run it on a container or wherever. And I would say there's a very similar approach happening in the world in general, right? Because there are, despite the little bit of an echo chamber that we live in the cloud native realm, there are still a lot of organizations that are like, what is this container thing that you want to do? So really the way that I think about it is you have either some type of legacy application or you have an application that, maybe you've tested in a container and you've built an image around or something, and you want to be able to run it in serverless or in another application-centric service like Azure Functions or Azure Container Apps or something like that, and you want to be able to scale it in the new age approach of doing things. And that is a big jump for a lot of organizations. I mean, you just, again, taking that approach of, hey, I built a container image just to test to see if our application would work. And now we want to, instead of compiling on a Linux VM or a couple Linux VMs, we want to be able to spin it up in this service somewhere or in Kubernetes or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, when we were bouncing text messages backwards and forwards. You were like, "So, what are you doing over there?" Right around modernization. I was like, "Operating systems," and you were like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
that shift from Windows to Linux."
Oh yeah.
That's not an easy path, right? It's you got to break that application down into tiers, into chunks, and then move it over, right, to a Linux friendly, stack like .NET Core or whatever it may be, enable to get the best out of containers, right? And I feel like the industry has settled. It's not the right word, but like we don't like being pigeonholed, right? Like as soon as something new comes out on X, we're like, whew, next, right? But yeah, I feel like containers and Kubernetes as an orchestration platform has become, the app modernization approach, right? If anything,
I think it's the default now.
Yeah.
I think I said this May of 2023, and a lot of people disagreed with me, and I think people are starting to agree with me now. I said Kubernetes, like somebody was asking me, I feel like you're hearing less about Kubernetes in this. And I said, yeah, because it's the default now, right? Like it's boring, as it should be. It is the default production standard if you are net new or trying to do app modernization right now. For a lot of organizations around the world, the standard approach is still, ESXi boxes, right? Running, if you're a VMware shop, for example. But even thinking about it for example, I just got off a consulting project. I was working with a customer of mine to take their containerized application and test it out in server-side WebAssembly, WASM. So that's another thing of where in that exact scenario, containers were the legacy approach.
That's crazy.
And WASM was the modern application approach. Now that's not going to be for everybody because WASM is still so new in terms of like not it came out in 2017, so not super new, but new in terms of getting out into the public. Server side is very, very new. WASM Cloud just hit version 1.0. So that's not going to be the same for everybody. I'm not saying that's the approach everybody's going in. I'm just giving that op modernization example of containers at some point will be the legacy thing, and it's crazy to think about.
We were talking about it before, right? Container orchestration is the new sysadmin.
Yes.
Right. Like when we started off, we were Active Directory, rebels, right? User accounts, file share permissions. If you ventured off into DNS, poke around in there, see what happened. Right? 'Cause it's always DNS. But yeah, I do feel like containerization has become like the next sysadmin role, right?
Right. Yeah, I think the whole thing around DevOps and platform, well, maybe not platform engineering, but DevOps, cloud engineering, that is very much the new age style sysadmin. And that's going to change as well. For example, I just put out a YouTube video today. I was messing around with a couple things around what AI is doing for DevOps engineering, cloud engineering. And I'm not going to talk too much about it, but from a high level, because when Gen AI and stuff first came out, I didn't touch it. I didn't care. I just started caring probably the past month or so. But what I did was I used Azure OpenAI services or Foundry in Azure to create like my own little agent that could do the low-hanging fruit of creating me a pipeline. Because why do I need to write in YAML my upteenth pipeline, right? It doesn't make any sense. So I can actually offload that low-hanging fruit, and then I can worry about the design and the scalability and the performance and the monitoring and all that. So that'll be the next thing, right? Eventually, the DevOps engineer will then go towards, in my opinion, using AI agents as like automation 2.0 type of deal. So there's just so many different steps to this app modernization thing, and app modernization also follows a trend of what roles are doing what.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. If we look at, GitHub Copilot as a free tier, by the way. Now I keep blasting that everywhere because I don't know about you, but it's brought value to my life. But like now you can sort of ask it to write like code space containers to then talk about the pipeline, right? And start building out that process.
Yep.
I mean, when we started out, it was you fumbled around until the code worked and you were proud, right? And then you come back 6 months later, look at it and go, that's the worst piece of work I've ever done.
Exactly.
I do feel like AI is a great place to show you where to start or what good looks like, right? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, let's take that same thing that you were just talking about. There was a time where we were fumbling with code and trying to make it work. And then we were like, yeah, this thing is awesome. We're going to still be doing that for quite a while, by the way. But the next iteration of that is going to be you're fumbling with the Python that you used to create the agent, or you're fumbling with the data set that you fed the agent, or the fine tuning that you had to do, or creating the RAG around the specifics that you needed your model to do. It's going to be the same concept, just shifted, and that's everything in tech. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see per day on LinkedIn that AI is going to take your job and this and that. And look, you and I came from the same place. My first job, like I started out as a Windows sysadmin, Windows help desk, all that stuff. And from then to now, I mean, there were so many conversations around PowerShell was going to take every sysadmin job. Virtualization was going to take every server engineer's job. No, it didn't. It just shifted. Did it take the jobs of the people that didn't keep up to date? Sure. And that's every type of job known to humanity. That's what medical doctors were 150 years ago compared to now. I mean, it's every single role is like that. So I don't think anybody has anything to worry about. I think it's just a shift.
I've experienced that myself. Circa 2016, Microsoft rep comes into my office, tries to sell me Office 365 at the time, and I'm like,
yeah,
that's going to take my job. That's initially what I thought, right? And then he was explaining it to me, and we got into the detail, and luckily he talked about the positive benefits of taking Microsoft Exchange away, right?
Exactly.
I mean, if you don't know what Exchange is, if you listen to this, it's a form of PTSD for many of us, right, that listen to the show.
Yep.
But at that point, I realized that I need to get on this cloud journey to evolve, right? That's going to be the next platform. So sometimes you've got to, make a judgment call and go, right, this is what I need to do next.
Yep.
This is
100%.
what I need to invest my time next.
Yeah. And I mean, it's, you working at Microsoft, me being a Microsoft Azure MVP, we have particular insight to information that not everybody else does. And there's just some really amazing things happening from a modernization perspective, right? Inside and outside of AI, containerization as a whole. I mean, even like Azure Container Apps, for example, which is if you want to containerize your application and not have to worry about Kubernetes, that's a great solution. And they just put in preview GPUs. So if you have a GPU intensive application, you can throw it in there. AKS Automatic is pretty much, hey, you want to run Kubernetes and you want to focus on performance, you want to focus on scalability, you want to focus on design, you want to focus on getting your application out there without having to worry about anything else. That's a thing too. And that's a huge shift, right? So there are a lot of really, really amazing things happening when it comes to modernization as a whole right now. So hybrid cloud too is a big part of that story.
We'll get on to that.
Yeah.
That's a back to the future story, right there. I just want to ask though, so why is modernization critical for businesses today? What kind of scenarios have you seen?
Yeah. So for me, it's two things. The first is eventually what you are running on will no longer be supported. Okay. And what do I mean by that? I don't even necessarily mean licensing. Hey, for example, right now, a lot of people said everybody's going to move off of VMware. Well, guess what? It's actually far more expensive for organizations to move off of VMware than it is for them to just bite the bullet and pay the new fees, because having the ability to transfer and all that and yada yada. So yeah, they still have licenses, but guess what? With everything coming out from a cloud perspective, everything coming out from a containerization perspective, eventually they're going to run out of people that are good to manage that stuff. People are going to retire, and nobody's focusing on building a VMware stack right now in their free time. They're focusing on learning the cloud and learning containerization and all these different services. So eventually you run out of support. Literally, the people run out. The second thing is ease of use. So for example, a lot of people say, wow, the cloud is really hard. There are so many services and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. If you came from a bare metal background, you wouldn't be saying that. You know, if you compare, okay, let's walk through the scenario, right? You're in a bare metal environment and you want to deploy a new application. Well, first things first, you got to call that server rep and say, hey, can you ship me a new server? If you're lucky, you're going to get it in a couple of weeks, back order, maybe 6 to 8. Then it comes, oh, I need to rack it and stack it. Oh, then I need to get with the networking team. Oh, then I need to install the operating system. Oh, then I need to configure the actual server, right? And I can do all of that in about 3.5 seconds in Azure right now. So the ease of use in terms of modernizing where you're running your application stacks, it just saves you a ton of time. It saves a ton of low-hanging fruit. A lot of people can focus more on driving business value and overall engineering value versus I need 3 guys to pick up this server with me because I can't pick it up myself, you know, and rack it and stack it in a server and plug it in. So those are my 2 biggest things when it comes to overall modernization.
Remember doing the deadlifts with the APC battery packs?
Oh, yeah. And the worst thing is, I mean, I started off my career working at MSPs, like managed service providers. And you'd have some clients where those APCs are in some closet somewhere on some top shelf where you got to use a little mini step ladder just to get to it. Yeah, no, for everybody listening that's saying the cloud is hard, you don't know. You don't know the days of setting up servers. I mean, I'm sure you know this as well. I'm sure you've been there. I can't tell you how many times I've spent 18 hours on a project moving from one data center to another.
Yeah, I've slept
on data center floors.
I was just about to say, right? You know, those trolleys that you get in every data center with the screen from the 90s and the keyboard.
Yep.
Like you can turn that into some sort of like pillow, believe it or not, right? Like it's an actual thing. But yeah, and the smell of a data center as well. I don't know if it's the air conditioning, right? Or the fire retardant. I don't know which one you want to.
Yep.
But yeah, it's an experience. It's maybe I'll come back.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, the cloud is, I think with the cloud, it's more trying to keep up and trying to invest your time in the right technologies, because
100%.
It's easier to release services, products, new tech.
Yep.
Some of those flourish, some of them just land flat on their face, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, so
totally.
That's where, you know, looking at the community can really help as well. Get us direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big thing too is understand that when so Kubernetes is 10 years old. We are now just talking about it becoming a standard. That means just now, large enterprises are really thinking about implementing it. Took 10 years. Virtualization was a little bit shorter, probably 5 or 6, but it's the same thing. So the good thing to remember is, you know, we're talking about the whole echo chamber thing before. When in the cloud world, like when we're all on social media and we're all talking about things and we're all going to these conferences, what you gotta understand is you're in an echo chamber. Like AI taking this job and that job and developer job. You know how many organizations aren't even thinking about implementing anything from an AI perspective right now? I mean, it's one of those things where, to your point, like, you know, all these services come out and you don't know what to focus on and all this. Here's what I would do. Number one, don't hop on the newest thing. Number two, go on LinkedIn, search for jobs that you're interested in, and look at the recs. Once you understand the requirements, that's when you know what to focus on.
Yeah, that's definitely some sound advice. If you look at, should we say, tech personalities, I was going to use the word influencer, but it's not my style. It's not my style. It's too douchey, right?
Yuck.
But they're unicorns, right, Michael? It's like they've got all these skills. They look like they're, engineering the DeLorean or whatever it is, but actually, it's not even 1%, right, of the tech stack that customers or enterprises, organizations are using.
Not at all. And to be honest with you, this is why and this is sad, right? Because I know personally what it's like to want to build something and go build it and it not work. I know that mental strain. I know those nights of you're really not sleeping, and when you're up, you're really not up. A lot of startups and a lot of vendors in general in today's world are failing, not because the engineering isn't sound, not because the product isn't good, but because there isn't a lot of adoption. And the reason why there isn't a lot of adoption is because, again, we're in an echo chamber, right? We're in this echo chamber of everybody's using this thing, everybody's doing this. No, they're not. And that was a big reason why I wanted to transition out of just talking about Kubernetes, because there was a couple of years there where I pretty much just spoke about Kubernetes. And what I realized was I can't help as many people that I want to help from a content perspective, from a consulting perspective, from a live training perspective. I can't do those things if I'm just talking about this thing. I got to talk about things that are really useful in production. Kubernetes is super useful in production, and I'm going to continue to talk about Kubernetes, and I'm going to continue to iterate on what's used with Kubernetes right now. But I also got to talk about other things to help everybody else, because like you said, there's such a small percentage of people.
It's awesome. I think we should talk about going back to the future. Right? We were lots of references to 80s nostalgia movies, right? You can probably tell how old me and Michael are. But yeah, this last week was surreal for me. I had a couple of scenarios come up, and it involved procuring and selling some tin, right? So when we talk about tin, we mean physical service. So it's what Michael was talking about before. I had a scenario from, let's just call it customer A. And we're like, this cloud thing's great, but can you get it running in a mine shaft? Like 3 miles underground. And I was like, hold my beer, right? Let me see what I can do. And those scenarios are now happening. So when we talk about hybrid cloud or adaptive cloud, that could be IoT, Edge, or the hypervisor. And when we talk about hypervisors, we normally traditionally talk about ESXi, so that's VMware or Broadcom. And then there's Hyper-V. And then there's some niche ones out there that are like open source. But you've now got organizations that are used to a centralized cloud platform. And they're like, well, why can't I do that on premise? So effectively, it's like, how do you bootstrap?
Right.
Pick a cloud, right? Yeah. I can talk about Azure, but pick a cloud and extend those capabilities back to on-prem. Right. I mean, what are you seeing out there?
Hi, listeners. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Code to Cloud community. Your support and enthusiasm fuel our mission to bring you the best insights and conversations around cloud-native technologies. If you've enjoyed the podcast and would like to help us keep it going, you can support us through Patreon. Every contribution, big or small, helps us cover production costs and continue delivering valuable content to our listeners. We're incredibly grateful for your support, whether it's through Patreon, sharing the podcast with your network, or just being a loyal listener.
Yeah. So let's go back in time a little bit. There was a time where the major cloud providers said openly, everybody's going to be in the cloud. This whole on-prem
For
thing
sure.
going away. This thing's silly. Everybody's going to be in the cloud. Well, a couple of years later, the major cloud providers said, "Uh-oh, not everybody's in the cloud," which is when you started to see things like Azure Stack HCI come out. There was an Azure Stack HCI had a name before. I forget what it was. Now it's called Azure Local, right? You have Azure Arc, you have EKS Outposts, you have EKS Anywhere, you have AWS Outposts, you have GCP Anthos. All the major cloud providers are now providing these hybrid solutions, which essentially means you can take a box, you install that box in your data center, you effectively install an operating system that allows that box to connect to the cloud, and then every other box in your environment is now more or less connected, right? So you can run things on-prem and it makes it look like it's running in the cloud. So like I can use Azure Local. I just ordered a couple of Intel NUC Extremes to build out a little hybrid cloud environment in my home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the Azure Stack HCI operating system on it. It's still called that even though it's Azure Local. And then what I'm going to be able to do is on the Azure portal, the portal's running as a SaaS, right? Not locally. I'm going to be able to create an AKS cluster and it's going to look identical to if I was just doing it in Azure itself, except it's going to be running right next to me. So that's the idea. The idea is I have things that I need to do on-prem, whether it's performance, because that's a thing, whether it's bandwidth, because that's also a thing, right? Look at telco providers, whether it's something around security and compliance, whatever it is, here's a way to do it. And the cloud, major cloud providers are seeing this and they want to give, customers the ability to do it. And this works out quite well for the super huge companies that still have a ton of data centers. Data centers have not gone away. Like I don't know of data centers that have closed down because they ran out of customers. Like there's still a lot of data centers. I'm in New Jersey. Like there are a couple data centers in New Jersey, right? They're still all over the place. And because of that, that people are still, customers, clients, whatever you want to call them, people are still running workloads on-prem. So putting this box into a data center allows, people to feel and work in the cloud, which is great. And then it also gives you the ability to burst out resources. So for example, let's say I'm running AKS locally, right? Or in a data center, wherever. And I say, okay, I want some HR, right? Or I want some HA, I want some high availability. I want, the ability to scale out if needed. Well, guess what? Now I can connect it in a way where my workloads can burst. That's what they're calling it, bursting into the cloud. So now I'm connected everywhere and anywhere, but just enough in a way that I need it to work for my environment. So it's very, very interesting stuff. It's very, very cool, in my opinion.
I saw a video, I think it was on LinkedIn. It was about 4 weeks ago. I think the guy was using Bicep and he was deploying the Azure Local via a pipeline. I was like,
yeah,
using resource providers, right? Such as, I'm sure there's one for Terraform out there, but what I liked about it was people like to learn those new skills and now they can bring it back, right? To on-prem.
Yep.
But yeah, just I've been on a bit of a nostalgia trip. It was like, how much IOPS do you need? How many cores do you need?
Yeah.
A data management port and a management port, right? Like it was speaking about VLANs, virtual LAN IDs, right?
Yeah.
It was all coming back a little bit, and it took me back to being a, data center engineer effectively. But I think those skills are still needed.
100%. I mean, if you think about it, the world, right? If you're thinking about Azure, you're thinking about AWS, you're thinking about GCP, Where is that running? It's running in a data center. Who's managing those servers? People with these skills. So it's they are still, even though they're not hot and sexy skills, they are quite literally still the most important skills in the world from a tech perspective, because if those skills didn't exist, none of this cloud native stuff would exist. None of it. Literally none of it. Like, imagine if we didn't have proper network admins, nothing would work. Literally none of it. Nothing. Zilch.
I was talking about this work about 6 months ago. Like, networking skills are hard to come by.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
None of the new early in careers want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, that's too hard. I'm like,
yeah.
When I was younger, it was like,
Yeah.
get that CCNA. That was like
Yeah.
the badge of honor, right?
Exactly.
Like, it was,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, learning how to, you know, subnet and
Yeah.
everything else. It was,
Yeah.
and learning the OSI layer. But now, yeah, we got software defined networking, and I think that's, I don't know, maybe that's somewhere in the middle.
I think so, but it's still so important to understand, like, what is a CIDR range? What is a subnet? What are proper ports? How does this application have the ability to talk to that application or that database? Or how does a person have the ability to talk to this application? And it's, yeah, I mean, so I have a friend, she's been in the medical field for over a decade, and she wants to get out of the medical field. And she's always been interested in technology. So she's going to go to school for computer science, which is really cool. And one of the classes that she has to take is a CCNA course. And nice. I was like, and you know, it's funny because she you know, she got a whiteboard, right? So it's like, I got to go to her house now and like start to, hey, you want to take an IP address and turn it into ones and zeros? 128, 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2, 1. Let's go through the mapping, you know? And, but so those skills are, but that, right? Like, let's even take that. Let's take that chart of like taking a number or letters, right? If you go the ASCII model, or there's a new model now because emojis, I forget what that one's called, but like you take that model and you're like, all right, let's turn this into ones and zeros. Let's turn this into bytes, right? Like how the computer actually understands, because the computer doesn't understand English or whatever language. It understands these zeros and ones and this hexadecimal stuff. And it's in that stuff. I don't necessarily know if like people are going to need that. I think it's just more of like a magic trick at this point, but people are still going to need to understand like how to set up networks for sure, how to understand how many IP addresses your network needs, what ports are necessary, right? Where route A is going, how route A is getting to route B. And, you know, funny enough, I always tell people this too. Like if somebody asks me, what's the most important thing to learn about Kubernetes? It's networking. If you don't know networking, you literally can't do anything in Kubernetes. Like your applications just won't work.
Yeah, that's a new level of pain. That's something I had to go through as well. Right. But yeah, some solid advice. Right. So I want to just do a quick fire round.
Sure.
So we want to try and give people some advice for the year. Maybe they're early in careers, mid in career, or just wanting to try something new. A bit like your friend that wants to transition from the medical world and that CCNA. I think there's some kudos in that alone. God, I'm getting flashbacks. What are top 3 skills for this year that people should probably focus on?
So there's always the top 3 that are always necessary: networking, infrastructure, operating systems. Those are just the things that everybody needs to understand. Outside of that, I can tell you what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on overall app modernization, scalability / performance, and hybrid cloud. I'll also throw the AI agents thing in there, just because I want to get better at creating agents for particular tasks. So those are the 3 to 4 things that if I was everybody, I would be focusing on those things. You know, I know there's a lot around like prompt engineering and this and that. Look, all that stuff, sure, but it's secondary. It is very, in the real world, it is very much secondary.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I just want to plug some of the initiatives that you've got going on. So you're hosting some sort of virtual conference. Like I'm still waiting for my VIP tickets, right?
I know.
Backstage. What's going on with that? What's it called?
I'm waiting for your CFP to come in, man.
That's my call to action.
Exactly. No, yeah. So I created something called BuilderCon. And the reason why is eventually I want to have these things in person. But honestly, I just don't have the bandwidth to do the marketing and the sales. Because to have a good conference in person, you need to have sponsorships. And the reason why is because it's expensive. I mean, I was looking at venues in Austin and the cheapest I could find for the day was $7,000, right? So you need sponsors because this thing is expensive, and that's not counting food, that's not counting flight, that's none of it, right? So to host a good in-person conference, you're pretty much looking at a minimum of $15,000. Maybe for the first one, I take that money out of my own pocket, right? I don't know what it's going to look like because I don't have the bandwidth for sponsors. So right now, I don't have the bandwidth to go and sell the sponsors, right? But right now, I'm going to do the virtual where it's going to be a one-day event. And the gist is, the reason why I created this is because I see 2 things wrong with conferences today. Number 1, too much PowerPoint, right? A lot of theory up there. I never go to a session and leave with something that I can implement. Number 2, paid talks. I can't stand paid talks. Can't stand paid keynotes. None of it. I think that a conference speaker should be given a slot, whether it's a standard slot or a keynote slot, based on how well the topic is that they are talking about, right? How good the CFP is, how good their knowledge is around it. And you can get that from the CFP. So I created this conference with 2 things. Number 1, you can only have a max of 4 PowerPoint slides. The rest, all hands on. You must show something on the screen. Second, no paid talks. For any sponsors that are coming in, we do have one sponsor right now, which is great. Any sponsors that come in, you cannot pay for a keynote. You cannot pay for a talk. This is solely and purely an engineering conference that at the end of the day, you should have something that you can take and implement in your environment. That's the goal. And no other conference is doing that. No, whether it's paid or in person, no other conference is running it that way. Why? Because it's expensive and because people don't want to pay for it. So it's really hard to get sponsors for that type of conference. But regardless of the money, I don't care. If I did things for the money, I would be a multimillionaire at this point. I'm just doing it because I think that it's drastically important to have that type of event for the community.
I feel like we've been living similar lives. Last year, I tried to launch a Code to Cloud conference, and sponsorships was one of the most difficult things because they want to see the data, right? Like, what's my return on investment? And you're like, nah, we're doing this for the love. We're doing this for the devs, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I got my first in-person event. I launched it last year. It was Code to Cloud Day. So really excited to see what BuilderCon is. I feel like I need to put a talk in now. He's sort of called me out in front of everybody, but I'm excited.
Yeah, and we could totally do one together too. That would be great. Combine some event. Yeah.
Join forces against the evil forces of Skeletor, right? Or,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I'm actually not that far away from Canada. I got to make the drive up.
There might be something in that.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Exactly. That's it.
But yeah, it's been great. It's been great having you on. Yeah. Where's the best place for folks to find you?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is probably still the best spot. I'm still on X. I have the Blue Sky account, my website, all that stuff. It's all there. But I would say still best spot right now to reach out is always going to be LinkedIn.
Everyone says that. It seems to be like the default platform now, right?
Yeah, I think it's just the platform with the least amount of everything else going on. You know, I don't like. I want to my time. I want to be able to spend it creating value and giving education to people. Whether it's content, whether it's working with clients on the consulting side, whatever it is, that's how I want to spend my time. And the best way that I can spend my time for the community is LinkedIn. That's where the spot right now.
I agree. It's neutral.
Yeah.
Neutral territory. Probably the best way of explaining it.
Yeah. And videos are becoming like a really big thing right now.
Yeah.
So I started, creating some videos for LinkedIn, and even if on YouTube Shorts, there's like this. I just did it for the first time today. There's this green screen feature. So like what I did was on my phone, I recorded like me looking through something. I was looking at Azure Container App Docs, and then I recorded that on my phone, and then I was able to upload it as a short. But my face is the green screen, so it's like behind there. And yeah, it's really cool. So there's all really cool stuff that you can like post on LinkedIn now around videos and just different pieces of educational content that everybody can get.
So my final call to action for our listeners is I feel like there's a live stream somewhere where me and Michael are deploying Azure Local, right? And seeing how we can get that running. I feel like we could do that together.
100%.
But if you're a supporter of the podcast, you're loving the guests that come on, please feel free to head over to our Patreon site and try and help support us as well as we continue to grow and scale this platform. But Michael, it's been great having you on as always. I'm sure we'll have you back in the future. That's goodbye for now.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Code to Cloud podcast, where ideas meet innovation and the future of tech takes flight. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your network. Let's keep building the tech community together. For more insights, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at codetocloud.io. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, every line of code has the potential to shape the future. See you in the cloud.